get your notes, you know, call your colleagues, call everybody that needs to join this session to come in and benefit from today's discussion. I encourage you to be present, participate, ask questions, as many questions as possible. If there are areas that you have had concerns with, please, this is the time for you to bring your questions, because there are people who are ready to answer all your questions and clear all your doubts. So on behalf of all of us from ACT Foundation, I want to say welcome again and enjoy the session as we begin. Thank you. Abiodun, over to you. Can you...
Yes, please. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Mr. Gogo, for that. So, like he has rightly said, we have two wonderful speakers who will be speaking to the issue. I'll quickly go to the chat room to see what people are saying about their expectations for today's session. Faith from Sewin says she's here to become a better officer. Awesome. Colin from South Africa says she's here to learn about how others measure impact. All right, Faith, Colin. Jonah from okay, I don't want to bastardize that name. It says he's here to better their skills and knowledge on impact assessment. Olaide says he's looking to deepen their impact assessment knowledge. And Zinyamba wants to get new insights. Thank you. From South Africa. We see you all. So we see other people from Lagos, from Nigeria, from Malawi, from South Africa. Patrick is from Abuja, and he says he wants to improve his knowledge on impact assessment. I can tell you that we got you. Lamex, also from Malawi, says he works with Youth Response for Social Change. You are welcome. Lamek Natasha says that she wants to deepen her impact assessment knowledge and learn from others' experiences. And I can tell you that you will get that from this session and even more. All right, so we'll move on quickly so we do not take too much of your time. If you would like to have this session translated in your preferred language, you can go to your screen and click on the More tab, and then it will show caption. It shows as a CC button. You click on that, and then you get to select your preferred language. If you do not see More on your screen, I'm sure you will see the CC tab, and then you can select the language that you prefer to listen in, and then it will just be translated on your screen. All right, we'll take a quick poll right now in the next few minutes just to feel the people in the room. In a few seconds, the poll will come up. Just let me know if you can see the poll. Please confirm that you can see the poll. It has 3 questions. Okay, I see some people are filling already. Okay, we give a few more seconds to respond. Okay, a few responses coming in. All right, so we'll take in 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Okay, thank you. If you're still filling, please go ahead. The first question says, how familiar are you with impact assessment? I can see that 29% of the audience say they are very familiar. 50% say they are somewhat familiar. 11% say they have heard about it but never applied it. So, Mr. Pago and Ms. Tendai, I hope you're hearing our audience. And about 11% of our audience say they are not familiar at all. Okay, so maybe we need to be a little granular when we're responding to our questions because a couple of people are not familiar with impact assessment. We'll move on to the next question. Does your organization currently have an M&E or impact measurement framework? Okay, more than half of the people say they have it. About 18% say they don't have, and another 18% say it is in development. So I think this is a good one. This is a good one. So more than half of the people in this room currently have an M&E and impact measurement framework. So I suppose while we're conversing, while we're discussing, we learn if your framework is good to go, or if you need a couple of improvements on it. Now, lastly, what is the organization's biggest challenge with impact assessment? So 41% say they have limited technical capacity. 34% say they because of lack of funding or other resources. 6% say due to poor data quality or access. So is either their data is not good enough in their perception, or they don't even have access to the kind of data they need for impact assessment. Another 6% say they have difficulty communicating results. So I suppose that while we're having our conversation today, you get to hear how you can communicate your impact to your stakeholders. And lastly, another 13% say they have unclear indicators or frameworks. All right, we're hoping that when we have this conversation today, we'll be able to deal with some of these challenges. All right, thank you very much for participating in that poll, and I believe that that has helped our speakers to sort of read the room and see how they will be responding to our questions. In the next few minutes, I want to quickly go through who we are at Aspire Coronation Trust Foundation just before we start the conversation. So Aspire Coronation Trust Foundation, which is who we are, we pride ourselves as an award-winning organization who is out to address development challenges that we have found and have seen in our continent, Africa. How do we do this? We do this through different ways. One of them is through funding. Another is through capacity strengthening, which is what we are doing here right now. And then thirdly, we do that through strategic project delivery. So we partner with our partners in the delivery of their interventions. And we do this with both local and regional nonprofits and social enterprises. Our end game is to drive sustainable development across the continent. Here you see a snapshot of our big picture and how we do what we do. So our vision is to leverage relationships to create effective social impact solutions across Africa. And that is why we provide funding for nonprofits. That is why we also build capacity of professionals in the nonprofit space, just so that we can create these effective social impact solutions across the continent. We work in four focus areas. We understand that, yes, there's a myriad, a lot of challenges that the continent faces, but then at the moment we are tackling four of them, which is health, environment, entrepreneurship, and leadership. Our core values at Aspire Coronation Trust Foundation is accountability. We pride ourselves on being accountable to our funders, to our beneficiaries, and we do not joke with partnerships, which is why we work with the kind of partners that we work with. We are impact driven, so everything that we do, the end point is for us to see impact in terms of the quantity of people that are impacted and also in terms of the quality of life of these people. And we do not joke with excellence, and that is why you come to trainings like this and you see that we bring the best of speakers because we know that excellence is a no-brainer for us. We don't joke with that. Okay, so you remember that I said we have different ways that we do what we do. Grant making is one of them. Every year we open up our applications. We have the main grant that we do. We also have the special grant that we do, which is the Changemakers Innovation Challenge. That one ended recently. And this year we focused more on young persons who are driving innovation in their communities through the use of technology. And we had 4 winners show up today. They were announced at our breakfast dialogue. In case you missed it, you can catch up on YouTube on our channel. Next is capacity building. Like I said, this is one of the capacity building sessions that we do for our partners in the space. So you who are social entrepreneurs, you who are nonprofit professionals, and of course, our grantees through our professional volunteer program. Partnerships is something we do not joke with because we believe that, I always say this, I don't know if there's any meeting I have never said that if you want to go, want to go fast, go alone, but if you want to go far, then you have got to go with someone because really teamwork, does better than solo work. And yes, we also conduct research at different points in time because what we do, the interventions that we do, churns up a lot of information, a lot of data that can be used in decision making, that can be used in policy making, and different things like that. To get our research products, you can go to our website and you'll have access to all of them. And lastly, our thought leadership is also something we do very well. This we do through our conference, for example, where we bring together change makers around Africa to talk about the things they do, to talk about the wonderful works they do. Also, our Act Board, we started in 2022, spotlighting change makers in Africa and also building the capacity, of course, of development enthusiasts in the space. This is a snapshot of how far we have come since we came into existence in 2017 in terms of our capacity strengthening sessions, our Changemakers Innovation Challenge, our Breakfast Dialogue, our Act Board, and our research. And beyond numbers, when we think about what Shebekely is doing with women, for example, screening them free of charge, or when we think about that young boy or young girl who now has some source of livelihood because they now practice sustainable gardening because Faith International taught them to do that, or we think of that mother who is now able to have access to subsidized care because Help Mom, for example, got them in contact with the primary healthcare center and provided them, with things they need for their deliveries, and so many more like that. Or do you want to talk about Pride Africa, who is preventing malaria in pregnant women and also other women in the community, and so on and so forth. We can go on and on. So if you would like to get in touch with us, you can write to us at programs@actrustfoundation.org, or you can also contact us on Instagram, Twitter, X, and YouTube at @foundation_. And on Facebook and LinkedIn, we are Aspire Coronation Trust Foundation. Now it is time to meet our speakers. Are you ready or ready? I am going to introduce our first speaker, who is Mr. Edward Fagbong. He's the head of program implementation at MTN Foundation. Edward has over 2 decades of work experience spanning both the private sector and the nonprofit space. He joined MTN Nigeria Communications in 2004, where he headed different units and worked in different capacities. Then in 2018, he moved to MTN Foundation, where he drives the design and implementation of M&E systems, impact assessments, reporting, amongst other things. Edward is an associate member of the Institute of Corporate Responsibility in UK, and is also an associate member of the Nigeria Institute of Management, as well as the Sustainability Practitioners Institute of Nigeria. Can I see your chair in the chat box? Can you please give Mr. Edward Fagbong a round of applause in the chat room? I want to see that in the chat room. Okay, I'm going to the chat room now to see that we're actually sharing our speaker. Thank you, thank you. I'll introduce the next speaker, Ms. Tendai Matika. She is the head of Africa Responsible Investment Ecosystems at Principles for Responsible Investment. She's the head of Africa for Responsible Investment Ecosystem at PRI. PRI is a UN-supported organization with more than 5,000 signatories, and they represent trillions in assets, and that is under her portfolio. So you see that we're bringing you speakers who have actually done the work. She leads efforts to advance responsible investment awareness and practices across sub-Saharan Africa, and she works with investors. She works with investors in the ecosystem. All right, so before joining PRI, she worked with Global Reporting Initiative. And if you know GRI, you know they're very, very big on impact assessment. And there she supports organizations to help them communicate their impact on the economy, on the environment, and of course, on other people. Tendai holds a master's degree in social policy and development with distinction and an honors degree in development studies. She also has a bachelor's degree in public governance from the University of Johannesburg. Can I see your chair in the chat room for Tendai Matika? Okay. Now we are ready for our chat. I'm going to be going over to our speakers and then we'll be taking questions from them. Okay, I'd like to confirm that Tenda is here. Do you mind turning on your video? Hello, Ms. Tendai, are you in? You can just say hello if you're in. I want to be sure that you're
Yes, I
there.
am.
I can see you. All right, awesome, awesome. Okay, now we are going to start off with a couple of questions that we've gathered from the registration process, and then we'll take a few more from the people in the room. So if you have questions, anything around impact assessment, please keep it to impact assessment questions only. You can use the Q&A box right on your screen to ask your question. Please do not put your questions in the chat room because there's a lot going on in the chat room. All right, so I will start off with the lady in the room. They say ladies first, right? Okay, so I start with you, Tendai. Many nonprofits are focused on delivering programs, but they often struggle to measure their outcomes. Now, let us start off with why is it even important? Why is impact assessment critical to any organization's effectiveness and their long-term sustainability? Why should they even take impact assessment seriously?
Good day, and thank you, Abiodi, for the kind introduction and for laying out our objectives for today. I would also like to extend my gratitude to your colleagues at ACT Foundation for hosting this important session. I think sessions such as these provide an opportunity for peer-to-peer learning, and I look forward to learning from everybody. Today is a big day for the continent. For the first time in Africa, South Africa is hosting the B20 summit ahead of the G20 Leaders Summit next week. A big milestone for the continent and the global south. And impact assessment will ensure that the B20 recommendations translate into measurable outcomes and not just policy statements. Allow me to briefly introduce the work I do at the PRI before I transition into your question. The PRI is a nonprofit organization, the world's leading proponent for responsible investment. We are supported by the United Nations, and we work to understand the investment implications of sustainability and governance related factors, and to support our international network of investors in incorporating these factors in their ownership and investment decisions. We launched nearly 20 years ago in the year 2006, and we have grown to more than 5,000 signatories globally, managing 139 trillion USD in assets, signaling really a major shift towards sustainable finance and impact. And we work in the long-term interests of our signatories and financial markets and economies in which they operate, and ultimately of the environment and society as a whole. Now to your question, impact assessment is critical to an organization's effectiveness and long-term sustainability for several reasons. It measures real outcomes, not just activities. I think many nonprofits often spend time tracking outputs. For example, we'll track the number of trainings we've held or number of events we've held rather than outcomes, so the actual change we've created. By measuring outcomes rather than just the activities, nonprofit organizations can demonstrate like accountability to their donors, beneficiaries, and stakeholders, strengthening the trust and credibility. So impact assessment provides that data-driven insights that ensure that resources are producing meaningful results aligned with strategic goals. So if you're implementing a project and you have an impact lens, you understand what's working, what's not working, and can allocate resources more effectively and efficiently. And you can also scale successful initiative and discontinue initiatives that are not effective. So I'd say, impact assessment ensures accountability, transparency by answering two very important questions. Are we achieving the intended positive change? And how much impact is being created and for whom? Which can help support organizations in their long-term sustainability. Sustainable organizations are those that create lasting value for stakeholders and society, and conducting an impact assessment can help reduce your reputational or operational risks and strengthen your competitive advantage. So in today's competitive funding environment, investors and donors want the evidence of impact. From our Global Trends report at the PRI, when we look at the reporting data from our investor signatories, the word impact comes up highly in almost all reports from investors. So what is important is for organizations or nonprofits in this case to prove that their impact stands out and gain that significant edge in attracting support. I'll pause there.
Wow. I was just scribbling and scribbling. That was a whole lot to share in just a few minutes. Thank you so much very much for that. One of the things that stood out for me from your response is the fact that impact assessment is needed for us to actually measure real outcomes, as opposed to just measuring activities. So there are times that we do a lot of activities, and what we just have is that activities. So we need to start measuring the outcomes of these activities, months and years down the line. I also like the fact that you said it promotes accountability and transparency, really. So when you start measuring your impact, then you get to know how your resources are actually being used. Are they being used properly or not? All right, I'll move on to Mr. Edward now. And I just wanted to start from ground up, because I'm sure that we have a mix of nonprofits that are doing very, very well. And I mean in terms of resources, whether funding or structures or facilities, and then maybe a couple of others who are, not, who are still coming up. So we can just start with you listing some of the simple, and practical tools or approaches that small or resource-constrained nonprofits can use to conduct effective impact assessment. Remember when we're trying to read the room, and a couple of people were saying that because they don't do their impact assessment, the challenge they face rather is about resources. So what are some of those simple practical tools or approaches that resource-constrained nonprofits can use to effectively measure their impact?
All right. Thank you very much. I hope you can hear me loud and clear.
Yes.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you once again for this opportunity, and thanks to the organizers of this event and to the leadership of the ACT Foundation. I represent the MTN Foundation, and the MTN Foundation is the corporate social investment vehicle for MTN Nigeria, and it's been in existence for over 21 years now. We focus on 3 areas, which is health, capacity building, and economic empowerment. To your question about the tools, practical tools that non-profits can use to conduct impact assessment, I just want to take off from where Tenda stopped, which is talking about impact assessment, how critical it is for organizations. I'll share a story, and then I'll speak to 1 or 2 tools that I might recommend. A couple of years ago, when I was heading a monitoring and evaluation team, I came into the team, and the team was conducting some assessments at that time, impact assessments. And I met that they had piles of questionnaire, for different projects which they were working on. And it was quite manual. at that time to be using papers. We were trying to get a report out at some point, but unfortunately, we couldn't meet the timeline. And there's something critical about impact assessments. It's about the timeliness of it. Information is very critical because the information you get from such reports informs people to be able to make decisions. So at the end of the day, I just came to realize that that was not going to be sustainable. And so we had to pivot to something for starters. And the first tool I'll recommend, which is very, very accessible and available to everyone who is listening to me right now, is Google Form. I'm sure you are all aware of the Google Form. Very simple, very accessible for you to be able to carry out your assessment. You can design it the way you want it, and you can tailor it to your taste, and it helps a lot. And I tell you that with Google Form, we started with Google Form first of all. In a very short while, you're able to just conduct any assessment and you get results almost real time. In short, sometimes when people are filling those forms, Google has the capability back end to show you the number of people who are filling the forms. It also has the capability to be able to show you a graph and how the responses are coming up and so on and so forth. So I think it's a very, very simple, straightforward, and easy to access tool. And that's what I would recommend to anyone, particularly those who might just be starting off with their impact assessment journey. And we also have Microsoft Forms as well, which is also available, accessible to anyone. And beyond that, there are different tools that different organizations have also come up with, in order for easy way of gathering data and conducting impact assessments. One other one you may want to consider or check up is what they call the Kobo Toolbox. It's actually for non-profits. It works online. There are times you're thinking that you want to gather data and you are troubled with, maybe you want to be real time and all that. No, with this tool and several others like that, you can work offline and very ideal for field data collection. So we work with a couple of organizations that helped us to carry out impact assessment. And most of the time when they are in the field, you don't need to go to the field with paper and biro. You just have your mobile devices, download the app on your phone, and you are engaging. The questionnaire, of course, would have been designed and scripted and uploaded on that app. And the agents in the field can collect data and transfer when they are in an environment where they have connectivity, and just upload it back to the upload it to the back end where the data analysts can pick it up and analyze the data and come out with insightful information that is very critical for decision making. And there's so many other ones that you may want to look up. But like I said, I'll recommend for starters, for those who have never, who want to just start their journey in impact assessment, try the Google Form. Very, very handy, very useful. Microsoft Forms as well, Kobo Toolbox, and several others. There's another one called Outcome Harvesting. It's also good for impact assessment and so on and so forth. I'll stop here right now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. You have heard it from Mr. Fago. So if you're not using Google Form now, I think this is a good place to start using it. Microsoft Form, there's also the Kobo Toolbox and Outcome Habit. And even in these days of AI, I trust that there are a couple of other tools that just by searching online you'll be able to find. But I'm glad that our speakers have been as basic as possible with the Google Form, Microsoft Form, and others. I do hope that we're taking note of this and we're beginning to find the ones that we'll start using if we're not using them already. All right, I'll go on to Tendai. In your experience, how can nonprofits move from simply tracking activities? We had established this at the beginning. So how can they move from simply tracking activities to truly measuring impact that reflects change in the lives of the communities where they're working?
Thanks, Abiodi. From my experience in the nonprofit space, we tend to focus on simple output tracking. So it could be number of events held, number of trainings. I worked once many years ago for a health program that was being delivered by a nonprofit. And we were really, our indicators just looked at, the other outputs, number of test kits distributed. But this metric didn't reveal whether the lives or communities in which we're operating were truly changing. So to measure real impact, we needed to be more robust. We needed to be more outcomes focused to measure the actual changes in the well-being or societal conditions of the beneficiaries that we were reaching. So outcomes should be more SMART, so specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. So instead of, if you're, for example, in the customer service space, instead of improve customer service, define, for example, a SMART indicator, increase customer satisfaction score by, it could be 10%, 5% within 6 months, give it a timeline, make sure it's measurable. So essentially it's shifting from focusing more on outputs to outcomes, moving beyond activities to assessing the results of those activities, such as improved health, education, or improved livelihoods. So it is really about establishing indicators that can reflect the change, not just the participation numbers of the beneficiaries you're reaching. So when collecting the data, I'd say it should be both qualitative and quantitative. Combine your methods. It could be surveys, it could be interviews, stories, which provide, rich data to capture both the scale and depth of change. This provides, I think, a holistic view of your impact, and use those findings to improve programs continuously. So whatever you collect, ensure that you're using that data for driving more sustainable change on your program. So I know a lot of universities offer short courses, and nowadays there's a lot of free tools, free courses, online sessions such as today's that build the essential skills and promote that knowledge sharing. To summarize, I'd say, it's 5 dimensions of impact. What outcome occurs, who experiences, the impact or the change, how much. So it's the scale, the depth, the duration, the contribution. Is it additional risk? What could reduce the impact? And there's a number of framework and tools available, that can be used. We have the global framework that provides like thematic alignment. We've got the SDGs that could be used. But yeah, I'll pause there.
All right, thank you so much. Who's enjoying this session so far? I want to see you drop your emoji in the chat because I am so totally enjoying it. And I like the fact that you mentioned stories and interviews. So it pretty much means right from the outset, right from designing your program, you should be thinking outcomes and not just output, not just number of persons trained, number of interviews done, number of so done. What about a few months down the line? Can you collect a couple of stories to see what has improved? Or even pre and post test, for example, and a couple of months down the line, you see what has changed in the lives of those people, because it's not enough to just train people and then leave them to it. What exactly are they doing with the skill? What exactly have they done with the knowledge? Okay. All right, we'll move on to Mr. Edward. I'll ask you about, so we're still around some of the things we don't get right about impact assessment. And I really just want us to dwell a bit more on this. What are some of the mistakes that you have seen? You work with MTN Foundation, for example, and I suppose that you work with communities, if not non-profits themselves. What are the mistakes that you have seen that, you know, these stakeholders, these organizations make when they are trying to measure or communicate their impact? And what would you say to them to avoid these kind of mistakes in the future?
Okay, thank you very much. I think this is actually a challenge for most organizations when it comes to impact assessment. And one of the common mistakes organizations make is confusing outputs with outcome. I'll give you an example. If you intend to train, say, X number of women, maybe on digital skills, and say if your target was to train 500 women on digital skills, and at the end of the day you were able to achieve maybe 500 of them trained, maybe after 1 week or 2 weeks, or maybe you were even able to do maybe 450 women at the end of the day. Now, there's the tendency to confuse the fact that, oh, we have trained 500 women, and think that that is something worthy of celebrating, because you're not actually communicating impact. What you're doing is that you're confusing what output is with what outcome is. So rather, you should be saying what has happened to, out of, say, for example, if you've trained 500 women, 70% of them, as a result of the training they have gotten and the experience they have gathered, have been able to either maybe start a business or secure a job or secure grants and so on and so forth. So I think it's very important that we avoid confusing outputs with outcomes. Outputs it's not outcome, right? Another thing is that a lot of the time organizations do not have very clear theory of change. And I think that's where the foundation should be for everyone who wants to conduct an impact assessment or want to measure impact of their program or intervention. A couple of years ago too, I think I was at a training at LBS, and we were having conversations around these. And it was amazing that quite a number of organizations do not even have what is called a theory of change. And what is a theory of change? In a very simple way to put it, is a roadmap. The plan that shows you where you are going to at the end of the day. What is the impact that you see? What changes do you want to see as a result of the intervention or the initiative you have brought in, that you want to do? So if you don't have a clear theory of change, a clear description of what impact, long-term impact is to you, if you don't have a clear description of what changes you want to see, then there's going to be a lot of problem in terms of what you're measuring and how you're measuring. Then you now find out that people don't get the right things to measure, or they don't get to report the real impact of the interventions that they've carried out. One other thing is over complicating the indicators you want to measure or the metrics. When you begin to use too many indicators, maybe thankfully, I think when we started with, you said to us that we should try as much as possible and be very granular with these, because of the statistics we saw at the beginning with the poll that was conducted. So the question is, what are the indicators or what are the metrics you are going to measure? Try as much as possible to make them as simple as possible. So take, for example, let me use the same example I've used before about training women. What are the things you want to measure at the end of the day? Do you want to measure, say, for example, the number of women who have gained employment as a result of the training? or the number of women who have gone ahead to also, maybe some of them have been in employment before, some of them have started a business before. So how many of them have recruited more people in their businesses based on what they have learned and how it has helped them to expand their businesses? So as much as possible, make the metrics quite simple, straightforward, and not complicated, such that if anyone sees these results, they are able to relate that, oh, of a truth, this is very, very important, and this is very, very reasonable and realistic. Sometimes also one of the mistakes organizations also make is that they wait for too long to measure the impact of what they have done or to assess impact. So sometimes people wait until the end of the project to assess impact. I think impact assessment starts from the beginning. It even starts from the conceptualization. That's when you begin to ask yourself, what changes do I want to see? And in defining the changes you want to see, you have already identified what you want to measure. And you're also asking yourself, when should we measure? What's the time for measurement to happen and all of that? And of course, I know that there are times when you have to wait till the end of a program or an intervention to do some measurements. But of course, there are also going to be certain kinds of measurements you carry out along the line, so it's very critical. So, but a lot of the time, organizations wait till the end. Nothing is being measured along the way to identify maybe there are gaps, to identify maybe there are challenges or intended and unintended consequences, and such that you're able to fix those issues whilst you're still running the program. So a lot of the time you wait till the end and only find out that certain things have gone wrong and had skewed what you wanted to see. And so whatever you measure at that time may not be giving you the desired outcome of what you want to see. So I think those are some of the things I like to talk about, which are the common mistakes that organizations make. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I must be your best student in this class so far because my notepad is full.
Okay.
I know, and with the way you have responded, I feel like asking our audience, how often, do you conduct impact assessments in organizations? You want to quickly drop that in the chat room. How often do you conduct impact assessments in your organization? Do you wait to the end? Do you do it midway into your intervention? Do you do it after maybe a couple of years after the intervention? We'd like to see in the chat room. How often do you conduct impact assessment in your organization? I'm waiting for our responses, and then we'll move on to the other question. Okay, thank you for appreciating us. Our participants say that it is easy to understand what you're both saying. Thank you. Okay, Exido does yearly. The impact assessment is done yearly. All right, any other person waiting to see our responses? Quarterly, okay, Faso says quarterly. Yearly, I'm seeing another annually. Impact assessment is done quarterly. Okay. Yeah, a couple more responses. Monthly. Wow, that must be a lot. Middle and at the end of the intervention. Okay, someone says at baseline, midline, and end line. Okay, Mr. Edo, what are you saying? Are you seeing best practices? Ms. Tendai, are you seeing best practices so far? Some people say they do their impact assessment annually, some do it midterm. Some say they do a baseline, they do a midline, and they do an endline. So that's at the beginning, midway into the intervention, and at the end. Okay, so this is not a blame game now. This is not to say, oh, you have to do it this way, but just to see what you're doing so far. And I'm hoping that by the time we finish these discussions, there may be some things you need to tweak in the way you carry out your intervention. So if you've been doing it annually before, do you want to tweak it to say, okay, so midway into the year, let's also see how we're doing so that, like Mr. Edwards said, we can quickly pick those things that may not be working well. Because if we wait till the end of the year, then we may not be able to salvage the situation any longer. And if you have been confusing outcome for output, stop it. I'm just going to say, please ensure that, now beyond measuring just the activities, we're going down the line to see what is the result of what are we going to be seeing, or what are we seeing now that is different just because of the activities that we carried out. All right, I'll move on to our next question. That's for Ms. Senda. How can organizations turn their impact data into powerful stories that inspire their stakeholders, funders, partners, and the public without losing the rigor of their findings? So how can they communicate their impact data into powerful stories? Oh, I need to mention that we have participants on YouTube as well. This is not to say that we recognize you. We see you. Thank you very much for joining. If you have questions, please put it in the YouTube chat room as well, and we will take them as we go. I also understand that our Q&A box is not functioning at the moment, so I apologize for that. So please use the chat room, and we'll try and fish out your questions as possible. Okay, over to you, Ms. Linda.
Thank you once again. I just wanted to, before I respond to the question, I wanted to echo Mr. Edwards, what he said around having a clear theory of change. I strongly agree it should be the foundation. Can tell an example, a case study I once read that looked at training journalists on the use of sustainability reports for storytelling. We had to look at the direct and indirect impacts, but what was most important for us was what's the theory of change. So when we train them, then what are we getting it to after that? So that really helped us in coming up with indicators that were more outcomes focused, looking at both the indirect and direct impacts that we would have. Now to your question around storytelling, I think powerful stories are critical, and I think we need to learn to tell our stories better. Especially on the continent, there's a lot that happens, good case examples that I think a lot of people globally could learn from. And so we need to tell our stories better. And impact assessment will give you that evidence that you need for your storytelling. You contain that data that you get into powerful stories. And for me, I always find that combining the evidence or the data with emotions really is great to showcase, the impact of whatever program you're working on. So demonstrate your evidence with emotions, and that could be through short videos of people or communities whose lives you have changed because of the work. And that certainly helps to build trust and credibility because you're putting emotions at the center of it. And also, case studies, infographics, and visuals to simplify sometimes data can be complex for a community member. You could put out, your impact data, but they would not understand. But through simple infographics or visuals, that certainly helps to simplify the data. And so that leads me, I think, to the point of learning to tell our stories and tailoring them for different audiences. So, your funders, your donors would, or investors, for example, would want to understand the ROI or the scalability of the program. You would have other nonprofits or partners that would want collaboration opportunities, and the public would want inspiration and hope. So you need to tailor your story for your different audiences, and how you would even distribute your story. You need to consider that. So I'd say instead of telling stories of every activity, tailor your story, but also focus on the impact that your program has had. From an investor perspective, investors are increasingly looking into the impact of their investments, having, the impact their investments have on the issues at stake that we face. So consider connecting your data to outcomes. So you can translate the numbers into meaningful context. So instead of saying we trained 500 farmers, for example, You could look at it more with an impact lens and say, from those 500 farmers that we've trained, what did we train them on? Did we train them on sustainable farming practices? And what has that led to? Has it led, for example, to could be 30% water reduction, water use reduction, or improving crop yields? Or it could be that you trained farmers on how to conduct effective employee engagement, which resulted in better workplace practices, higher employee retention, and higher productivity. So remember that impact assessment will deliver that proof because it provides then the evidence base of your story. It answers, are we achieving the intended positive change, and how much impact is being created and for whom? Thank you.
Awesome, awesome. And this, it just keeps taking us back to storytelling, converting your data into stories. Thank you so much for that. And Mr. Edward, feel free, at any time you need to add to what Ms. Tenda is saying, please go ahead, and vice versa, in case you just want to give another perspective to the restaurant.
That's fine, thank you.
Oh,
but I think there are some
okay.
questions in the chat room. Do you want?
Yes, I wanted to
check them later.
into that. Yes,
Okay, fine.
I'll take them now,
Okay.
then go back to the other questions we have here, because someone actually there's one that piqued my interest here, who was asking about how they can conduct impact assessment with people who do not have access to online forms. How is that going to pan
Okay.
out? How can they effectively do that for people who don't have access to online forms? They don't even have access to internet. So what would be the best practice for conducting impact assessment with such an audience? Who wants to go?
Okay, yeah. Let me take that. The question was about how you would want to collect testimonials or feedback from individuals who don't have access to online forms, right?
Yes. Good.
And who are not literate enough to use it. And I think this is a very common thing we've seen a couple of times. So we carry out a lot of interventions in underserved communities. And the truth of the matter is that you can't, some of these people, if you deploy online forms for them, they don't even have the devices to access those forms. So what we do is, and that's one of the things you need to understand about impact assessment. Impact assessment is not just about quantitative, it's also qualitative. So what we usually do is to have engagements in those communities and collect feedback from the beneficiaries orally. You want to record that, so what we do in the MTN Foundation, for instance, is that we go with our media team and we document such impact stories. And sometimes you may need to also, some of them don't even understand English, but you might need to collect that feedback or testimonial in their local languages and translate or transcribe, as the case may be, to English language. So that is very, very critical. And sometimes also, you might also want to adopt an FGD in terms of collecting feedback from beneficiaries. So I'll give you an example. Maybe you have done a health project in a community where they have been suffering from a waterborne disease. Maybe you provided them with potable water, and you want to know what the impact has been after a couple of months or a year thereabout. You could go into that community and gather a few people together in a room and ask questions. And you would gather a lot of feedback about the impact of what you have done. And you can document that either through video or through audio recording and so on, because definitely some of them can't write, they can't read, they don't even have access to devices that you could use to get your feedback. So I think that's one way that is very reliable, and you can document the feedback. Then I'd like to also put a caveat here. There are times when you might need to also get their consent, because you don't want to also capture information about them and put it out there and becomes an issue for you and your organization. So you need to tell them ahead of time and say, look, this is what we're going to use your feedback or your testimonial for, and get their consent to be able to either record them, whether it's a video recording or an audio recording. I hope I've been able to answer your question. Thank you.
Yeah, I hope that he has answered your question. I think you actually did justice to that.
Yeah.
You want to add something?
Yeah, so if I may add, I would also say, leverage your local networks or partnerships. This is where, leverage partnerships with local NGOs that are operating in the area. So look at getting local facilitators from there. Mr. Edward mentioned, that look at delivering some of these, perhaps if it's a face-to-face interview in the local language, and that's where the partnerships comes in handy, because then they're operating locally and have local facilitators. And there is a participatory method called storytelling sessions, and this is also just echoing Mr. Edward, where they get to tell narratives from their perspectives in their language. That's also a great method to use.
Thank you very much on that. I think really quickly you can respond to this other one. So someone is wondering, since impact assessment takes time, at what point in the project cycle should we realistically begin measuring impact?
Okay, I saw that question as well. Good question. So first of all, the word impact is used interchangeably. Remember that I said that sometimes people confuse output with outcome, right? And so there's nothing wrong in measuring. So let's use that word in inverted commas now, impact, at an early stage of your program. So I give you a classical example. Imagine that you have carried out an intervention in a community, let's say providing water in a community that doesn't have access to potable water. And in maybe 1 month, you've recorded, say, about 500 people who have gone to that, to the water source to get water, and maybe 500 households or 500 individuals. That's something to measure. That's something to capture. But that is not really impact in that sense. That's like an output of what has happened. 500 households have been able to get potable water based on the fact that you're able to provide water for them. But when you want to measure the long-term impact, and remember, I also mentioned that you need to have your theory of change from the beginning. Your theory of change tells you what is the change you want to see at the end of the day. Now you are providing a water for a community. Of course, X, Y, Z number of people are going to use that facility. But the question is, in the long run, what do you want to see? So is it that maybe when you have done your baseline, you discovered that there are a lot of cases of waterborne diseases in that community? You find out that the average household spends maybe, say, X amount of money every day in trying to get water. So you are able to, along the line, capture the usage of water, what's the volume of water that is being consumed on a daily basis, and so on and so forth. That gives you an idea whether in the long run you might need to add an additional borehole to that community or not. So these are things you can measure along the line. The number of people who are using it, the number of times they use it, and so on and so forth. But in the long term, in the long run, tying it back to your theory of change, maybe one of the things you want to see is that you have seen a reduction in the number of waterborne diseases amongst the people in that community. You have discovered that you have also seen that the households have more savings now. So in the past, they would spend X amount of money per day on water, but now that money is coming back to them as savings. So you want to see the impact of that in the long run, and you also want to see perhaps maybe how economic activities have picked up in that community. So these are things you can't measure immediately. You would have to wait for a while, maybe 1 year, after 1 year, or more than that, and so on and so forth. But that doesn't stop you from also capturing data So there's something we call, project indicators and impact indicators. So there are things you are capturing along the line whilst you're also waiting for a mature time in order for you to be able to measure your impact at the end of the day. I hope that answers your question.
Awesome, awesome. I hope so too. Okay, there's another question here. Could the timing of impact assessment be activity specific, or should it be program specific? That's from Chosen Soul.
Maybe Tendai wants to take that.
Can you repeat the question? Sorry.
All right. So the question is, could the timing of impact assessment be activity specific or program specific?
So that's a great question. And, timing when to measure impact would depend really on the nature of your program and the type of change you want to capture. So you would have baseline, that's before the intervention, establishing, where you're at to be able to compare later. So, you get knowledge of baseline. And then you have the midline where you're tracking progress and you're making adjustments. And, midline is where you are really looking at early signs of change, engagement levels. And then you would have the end line, which is immediately after the program where you're measuring the short-term outcomes, the knowledge gained, the behavior changes, and then you have the post-implementation, that's the long-term impact where you're capturing this, the change that your project or program has brought about. So really looking at the effects or broader effects, like could be improved quality of living or policy influence. It really depends. So I would say you would need to look at a mixed approach in terms of timing, look at the baseline, midline, end line, and then post-implementation. That's then looking at the longer term impact.
Awesome. Thank you very much. And I'll quickly, follow up with this question, which is about, impact assessment being seen as a job for, a particular set of staff or a particular set of people and not everybody's job. And I'm talking about in terms of the organization. So what step do you think non-profit leaders should take to actually build a culture where they see impact assessment efforts as not just something for the M&E team, but something that the entire staff should embrace? Yes, you understand that?
Yeah, so I think leaders need to look at reconnecting all staff of the organization to the mission. I think it's important that all staff understand what the organization's mission is, the values of the organization, and that then helps to build a strong and thriving culture to support the M&E teams where it's it's not just siloed. So in some instances, I think culture is really a big buzzword, a box, I think, for leaders to tick at their leadership meetings, but it's so much more. I think it really is the heartbeat of an organization. And if all staff really understand what the mission of the organization is, it would guide actions, decisions, and how staff all help in measuring. So the foundation of any organization is the culture. And I think then leaders need to make sure that all staff understand what's the purpose, where do you want to go, what's your why as an organization really, and the mission should be documented, communicated, and understood by leaders, but as well as the staff, because then once it's understood, then you get a shared sense of purpose and ownership of work. So it is not just siloed when a colleague in M&E would come and then say, we need this data. You would find then that other colleagues are already collecting that because there's a sense of purpose, what is our why? So really, there's a number of ways that could be done, obviously understanding the mission and the culture of the organization, but also prioritizing opportunities for learning, amongst other things. I think learning should be continuous, and people are more likely to learn and lean into the mission and remain committed if there's opportunities for learning and recognition. And I think people do best work when they feel challenged, and involved. So train staff, regardless of what area they're in, why measurement is so important, so that it becomes a habit and not just an extra task. It's not just about delivering activities, but it really is a habit to say, oh, we're delivering this, but this is for us to achieve this. And I suppose this is where also the theory of change comes in, making sure that everyone understands what the theory of change is. Lastly, I would say, really, if the purpose and where you want to go is clearly understood, achieving impact just becomes everyone's responsibility, and not just M&E tracking indicators. It becomes everyone's responsibility.
Certainly.
Thank you so much. I totally agree. Mr. Edward, would you like to add something to that?
I think Tenda has done justice to that, so I'll just be
okay, awesome. I thought I heard you say something.
almost
Thank you so
repeating what she said.
Okay,
Yeah,
awesome. All right. I'll move on to, so this is as granular as it gets. There's someone here who wants to know the difference between input, outcome, and impact.
Okay.
Yeah,
Take it again. I think, did you say, take it again?
Okay, someone wants to know what is the difference between input, output, outcome, and impact. Oh, no, input is not there. I guess, of course, they do understand what input is. So they want a distinguishing factor between outcome, output, and impact.
Okay. This is a very common question we get almost all of the time. But one thing you must understand is that, just like I said earlier on, that even the word impact itself is contextual. You can use it interchangeably, So I assume that everyone understands what input is. Input is what you put into the program or into an intervention. You understand? The resources you deploy, the materials, the technical support, and all of that. But when you talk about output is your immediate result after you have carried out an intervention. That's your output. I want to train 1,000 women for 4 weeks. That was my goal. At the end of 4 weeks, how many women did I train? Did I actually train 1,000 women? Yes. If I trained 1,000 women after 4 weeks, that's my output. If I trained less than 1,000 and I trained only 900, maybe 100 did not show up, or out of the 1,000, the 100 did not complete the training, what I have actually trained was 900, even though my desired goal was to train 1,000 women. Now, what is my outcome? My outcome is short-term impact. It's your short-term impact. Now, if after training 1,000 women or 900 of them out of the 1,000 in 4 weeks, let's assume you train them on digital skills, on how to use digital skills to grow their businesses. And a woman comes back and say, thank you very much for that training. Did you know that I have never been on Instagram before, but I had to put my business on Instagram. And after putting my business on Instagram, I have an Instagram handle right now. And I discovered that in 2 months, I made sales that was more than what I'd been making in a whole year. That becomes an impact in a way, but it's a short-term impact, which is your outcome. Outcome of the thing you have done, which is the training you have provided for the women. A woman has come to realize that because you taught me how to use digital tools, you taught me that Instagram is a good platform for me to sell my business. And I began to do that. I have an Instagram handle right now. I made more sales on Instagram than on the physical, shop that I have somewhere. And I have made sales, in the last 2 months, which is more than what I've made in 1 year. That becomes your outcome. But in looking at what your impact is a long-term thing. Sometimes some impacts can take a number of months or years before you can see that result. So imagine, let's take that example again. That particular woman who we just described now, after 1 year or 2 years, comes back to you and says, guess what? I still want to say thank you for that exposure. Did you know that apart from the fact that I have an Instagram outlet right now, I have presence not just in Nigeria alone. I have customers in South Africa. I have customers in Ghana. I have customers in Europe. In short, we have an outlet right now in Europe. That's impact. Long term. It's not going to happen overnight. It's not going to happen just immediately. It might take a while for it to happen. But the question is, are you able to tie that back to the intervention? Was that the desired goal in terms of when you were putting out your theory of change? So that is how you can actually distinguish between your output, your outcome, and your impact. So there's a thin line in between sometimes, and if you're not careful, you could be reporting outcome output as outcome and outcome as impact. But you need to understand that there's a distinction. I hope that example has helped.
I think that example was very apt. I can see them cheering in the room. We're loving the responses from our speakers. Okay, I'll move on to Ms. Tenda. Someone is asking, what's the best way to show impact to your investors? So if you want to measure impact of educational or vocational training, so how do you demonstrate that to your funders or to your investors besides using success stories and testimonials? So this person wants to know how you can show impact to your funders and investors with respect to educational and vocational training. Precisely.
Thank you. So, like, a very good question, and perhaps Mr. Edward can come in there. I have no experience in the education or vocational sector, but I would certainly say that, obviously there's the usual reports that are written, and, depending on funders, some funders would have their templates and everything, but in showcasing your impact, it won't be immediate, like, Mr. Edward has just really explained. There's really a thin line. So in some instances, maybe your impact can be demonstrated years later. So it is really just constantly tracking, where if you look at a beneficiary, maybe it's someone that you've done trainings with, you'd need to walk the journey with them and really track where they're at to be able then to attribute that this is the impact that this program had over the long term. Obviously, there's the short term, but over the long term. So there's many different ways to communicate. Obviously, I mentioned the short stories. I'm a fan of videos, being able to document and allow people to narrate for themselves. So allow your beneficiaries to narrate, and that then, through their voices, that would be able to capture the impact that you've had.
All right. So in addition to what Tenda has said, and that was a very fantastic feedback there. You see, beyond just the testimonials, like the person said, one thing you need to understand is that your funders from the beginning would also have a form of documentation with you, which is how you're going to report. Now, remember I told you earlier on that your impact can either be reported in a quantitative manner or in a qualitative manner. So what you talked about when you said, apart from videos and testimonials, which is, of course, the qualitative and not quantitative. So the other ways in which you can report impact to your funders will be quantitative. using the templates, for example, that have been provided to you, the reporting templates or reporting framework, the data you are capturing, and you're showing that, yes. So for example, the example we gave earlier on, your funders are giving you funds and said, okay, we want you to carry out vocational training skills in a community, and we want you to train X number of people. And out of the X number of people you are going to train, let's imagine that we want you to train 500 people in 2025. And out of the 500 people we want you to train in 2025, we want you to train 250 women, 250 women, 250 men. So what is the evidence? You need to show evidence. You need to show maybe a register of the people you have trained with their names and details that is verifiable. That is what your funders may also want to see. Beyond just going about with the testimonials and the videos and all of that, we want to see concrete evidence in terms of data, quantitative, that we can see, that we can cite, and that convinces us that you're actually doing what you are supposed to do with the funds that have been provided to you. I hope that helps.
All right, thank you so much to you both. I think you guys did justice to that question. They were really apt responses, and I'm feeling it in the room as well. Our participants are really enjoying and they're finding insights in all of the things that you're both saying. I move on to Colleen's question. She asked, are there guidelines on the depth or how extensive impact measurement needs to be in relation to an activity? So she gives an example. Is there a different expectation for the impact measurement of a single training versus a long-term mentoring program? So
Can you take that question?
There are guidelines. Okay, so Colleen wants to know if there's any specific guideline on how extensive an impact measurement needs to be. So there is activity, which is one-off, and then there is a program, which is also long-term. So she's asking, are there particular guidelines on how to report such activities, how to provide impact measurement reports on such activities? And she specifically said a single training event, and then she then talks about versus a long-term mentoring program. So what should the impact measurement look like for both interventions?
The distinguishing factor there would be your indicators. What are the things you want to measure? So if you want to do a single training program, a one-off training program, the question I want to ask you is that, what do you want to train about? Okay, you want to train about what? How many people do you want to train? In which community? What is the ratio of male to female? Those might be some of the things you want to capture, you want to measure, you want to report. What is the age bracket? Are you targeting a particular age bracket? For example, if you say you want to train people between the ages of 18 and 35, and you make it a call for application, sometimes you'll be shocked. There are people who are who are not within that age bracket who are also applying for that. And you need to measure to be able to say, oh, this is the impact of what has happened and all of that. So for a one-off training program, the indicators will be different from a long-term program that you want to do. So that's why I said, from the conceptualization of what you want to do, and whilst you are putting together your theory of change, you will define the indicators you want to measure. As a matter of fact, your theory of change tells you what is the desired goal you want to see. Some desired goal is just a one-off output. And what I mean by one-off output is that, oh, I discovered that young people in my communities don't understand something around digital tools. And I just want to teach them about digital tools. And I've taught them about digital tools, maybe just a one-day class. I gather together maybe 50 people in my community and tell them that, look, do you know you can actually use digital tools to better your life? You can do A, B, C, and that with it. And that's the end of it. And I walk away from there. That is something. As opposed to, I want to do something in the long term. I've gathered together young people in my community. I want to teach them, or I want to train them on how to become maybe an artisan, maybe a tiler, maybe a vulcanizer. That's going to take a while, because people are not going to learn those things just one-off in one day. So, and the indicators are going to be capturing to see how things are progressing will be different from what you would capture if you're going to do a one-off kind of training. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I want to quickly follow up with this question, which is about how it is easy for us non-profit social entrepreneurs to want to just, align with what our donors want, even when it doesn't sit well with us, as a mission. And that would be how do we ensure that our impact assessment efforts are not just donor requirements, but actually they inform our strategic planning, our program designing, a couple of years down the line. Mr. Edward, did you get my question?
Is that for me?
Yes, did you get my question?
Is that for me? Yes, I got your question.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
Yes, that how do we ensure that impact assessment efforts are not just
donor requirements.
Donor requirements, is that correct?
Reporting. Yes.
Yeah, okay, good. The first thing to find out here is that before the donors came, what was your plan? What were you doing? Sometimes you don't just get the donors in the room in the first instance. The donors come after they have seen what you are doing, and they are impressed with what you are doing, and they see that what you're doing is going to create a great impact. Then they are willing to invest in that sense in what you're doing. So for non-profits to ensure that impact assessment efforts are not just donor requirements, the first critical thing you need to do is to make sure that your impact metrics aligns with your organization's goals. So let me give you an example. If your organization is set out to say you want to transform the health, the well-being of women in communities, let me put it in a more contextual manner. Imagine that you are in a community where the mortality rate in that community, maternal mortality rate is high, and you have set out an organization to say, our plan is to ensure that we bring down mortality rates, right? That's what your organization is set out to do. So the question is that when you begin to plan that intervention in ensuring that mortality rates, maternal mortality rate is reduced to the barest minimum in that environment, definitely when you want to capture your indicators, it must align with what you have set out to do. So your metrics, your impact metrics must align with your organization's goals. So you can't tell us that what you were set up to do is to ensure that women don't die while they have their babies. Then when you are reporting, you are telling us about something else that is not relatable. So that means you are not really getting it right from that word go. So I think it's critical that you ensure that there's an alignment between your organization goals and what you are measuring. So that at the end of the day, you are reporting back and letting us know that this is what I set out to do, and these are the data I've gathered to show that I'm on course and I'm making changes in that regard. Another thing is to ensure that you integrate impact data into decision making. How do you make decisions in your organization? What informs the changes that you make from time to time? It's by ensuring that you have defined data that is integrated into your decision making. So for example, if data is showing you certain things in the intervention you are carrying out, then that will begin to help you to see why you should do certain changes in that intervention. I'll give you a very good example again. So imagine that you set out to say, we want to make sure that we reduce to the barest minimum maternal mortality rate. And whilst you were doing that, you discovered that maybe you had made some investment in a primary healthcare center. Then you discover that the numbers have still not reduced. And you're able to, your data points to the fact that one of the critical points where you lose women is at the point of delivery, because the facility, the health facility, does not have adequate equipment to be able to support the women when they are giving birth. So that will help you to say, okay, maybe next time what we need to do is to buy more equipment or kits that will help women when they want to deliver their babies, so that there are no unforeseen issues or circumstances that leads to death. So integrating data into your decision making is also very, very critical. So the third thing I'll speak about is creating a feedback loop. So a lot of the time we do things, we carry out interventions, and we are just comfortable with what we're doing, but we're not getting feedback from the people who we're actually targeting. These things that I am doing, are they really addressing the problems that we thought we should be addressing? So if you don't open that loop, if you don't create an opportunity, an avenue for your beneficiaries to be able to speak back or share feedback with you, then you might just be missing out on some very critical insights that you could gather. And this is beyond just whether a donor is coming or donor is not coming. But you see, it enhances the efficiency of your program. So feedback is very, very critical as well. And I think it's one of the things that you must imbibe in your organization. And lastly, I think you need to build a culture of learning. We're talking about impact reporting here, impact measurement, and whatever we're talking about. The truth of the matter is that one of the critical things around it is we want to learn. We want to see where there are gaps. We want to ensure that those gaps are fixed. We want to check, okay, what is the results we have seen so far? And how do we ensure that the things we have learned, we have put them into practice, we have fixed areas where there are challenges, and we keep improving on our intervention so that we have a better outcome at the end of the day. I think those are some of the few things I will speak around that.
Thank you very much for that response. And I just want to quickly pick on the very last thing you said, which is about the learning culture, and that will bring me to the idea of collaborations, to partnerships. A lot of the times, organizations struggle with impact assessment, yet all they need to do is just leverage relationship with other organizations who have strength in such areas. And that will bring me to the question for Ms. Tenda, which is still around partnerships. So how can partnerships be leveraged to strengthen an organization's capacity to measure and understand its impact? So whether partnerships with other nonprofits, with funders, with research institutes, whoever, how can we use this partnership to strengthen how we as organizations, what our capacity to measure and understand our impact?
Yeah, so I'd say partnerships are crucial. If you want to build lasting and positive impact, you cannot build that in isolation. You would need collective action, and it would have to be collective action through partnerships. And I think that should be at the core of an effective response to the systemic challenges we face. If you look at education, for example, you cannot address youth unemployment, you cannot address it working in isolation. You would need collective action to address the challenge. I think what is absolutely clear is that organizations cannot tackle problems in isolation. I think acting in isolation only leads to a fragmented approach and poorer outcomes. I think back on a program I once worked for a nonprofit that was focused on children on the move. So looking at researching why children cross the border, for example, from Zimbabwe into South Africa undocumented, unaccompanied. And we had a nonprofit that was working in a specific community where most of these children were coming from. And based on their baseline, looking, okay, why do they do this? And they had a donor come to say, we can build a children's center in the community. They had to go back and think of their theory of change to say, we've set up this nonprofit, but what's our theory of change? What do we want to, what impact do you want to create in the community? Ultimately, they are looking at for children not to travel unaccompanied across the border. So partnerships really critical for creating that positive impact. I would also say in terms of partnering with academic institutions, those academic institutions, I think, can strengthen an organization's capacity to measure and understand its impact. They provide the expertise, robust methodologies, there's capacity building programs, and data analysis tools that you can get through the partnerships. And in most cases, academic researchers really provide that unbiased third-party assessments of an organization's programs, which then enhances the credibility and accountability to funders.
Thank you so much for that. Yeah, I hear collective action. Why act in isolation when at the end of the day, what you still get is poorer outcomes? So if you can leverage on a relationship that will bring you better outcomes, why not just partner with them and not work in silos? There's a question here around theory of change from Jonah, and he says, in relation to the theory of change, is it expected to include targets? Because different donors seem to approach this differently. That's still from Jonah. And it says, additionally, how does it differ from a results framework, as the two are sometimes used interchangeably and often misunderstood? He would also appreciate clarity on what is considered a standard theory of change structure.
Okay, let me make an attempt at that. By the way, I also do something with the ACT Foundation, which is supporting businesses or small organizations in getting their measurements right, monitoring and evaluation, and so on and so forth. And that's one of the things I also do with the ACT Foundation. To Jonah's question, the theory of changes and the result framework are two different tools entirely. I always try to tell people that in its very simplest form, the only way I love to describe the theory of change is the roadmap. It's a roadmap. See, look at your Google map, for instance, when you're traveling. When you are at your current location and you set your Google map to where you are going to, the best it can show you at that material time is the distance between where you are and the next place and the number of minutes it will take you. If you don't start that journey, you won't begin to see, if you put your phone in front of your dashboard and you are looking at the Google map, it will look like a very small distance. That's what a roadmap shows you. And that's what the theory of change is. The theory of change is also a summary of what change you would want to see in the long run. That's what the theory of change is. Now, the result framework is a little bit more structured and detailed, showing how each things are going to be measured by who, what is the timeline, and all the details, what's the purpose, what's the goal, and so on and so forth. So it's just, and to also use the Google map, for instance, by the time you start the journey and you're on that journey, then you begin to see more details show up. Things like you're on the fastest route, even though there's extra 25 minutes delay on this route, you're on the best route. But you didn't see that when you were going to punch in that destination initially. Then along the line, you begin to see that if you check the map begins to get wider and the map begins to show you more distance and all of that. You begin to see that there are journey roads, perhaps. There are alternative routes you can take if you decide to change course and all of that. You begin to notice that along your path, maybe there's a gas station, there is a hospital on your way, and so on. And so those are more detailed things, but they are still on the map. But initially, when you started the conversation, when you started you had to start the journey rather, and you punched in your destination, you wouldn't see all of that detail. So I think that's the simplest way I would love to use to explain this difference between the theory of change to you and the result framework. The theory of change in the simple form is your roadmap, your just summary of what the journey is and what change you want to see. Whereas your result framework distills, breaks things down for you, measuring what you, indicating what you want to measure, who is responsible, how you want to go about it, and in detail, granular. And you are checking from time to time whether you're on course or not. Because that result framework helps you to be able to achieve what you had set out in your theory of change ab initio. I hope that has been able to help, Jonah.
I trust that has helped Jonah, really. Okay, one final question from here. Let me see. Someone wants to know, how does impact assessment differ from monitoring and evaluation? They further ask, what tools or certifications support impact assessment? You may have to catch up on this video on YouTube because Mr. Edward, listed the tools that you can use for impact assessment. And then finally, they ask, are there professional communities or societies to stay updated and network with in terms of impact assessment or M&E as a profession?
Oh, okay, let me start with the first question that I think, let me be sure I got it right. The difference between impact assessment and monitoring evaluation.
M&E, yes.
Okay, sometimes when you say monitoring and evaluation, it can mean a process, it can also mean a function. So for instance, in some organizations, people have an M&E function. That means there's a team called an M&E team that carries out these functions. So that M&E team is responsible for also carrying out an impact assessment. But when you talk about the process, about what monitoring and evaluation is all about, there are two distinct things. So you have a project you're doing. Of course, you're going to carry out monitoring from the word monitoring of each phase and stage of the program or the project, monitoring of the processes, monitoring of what you are doing, whether you are on course or not. Then you have the evaluation part of it, which is evaluating the impact of what you have done. And that's where your impact assessment falls into. So the M and the E of it is your monitoring, which is, for instance, you are doing your midline assessment, you are doing your monitoring visits, you are doing your sports checks, and so on and so forth. Those are parts of your monitoring processes. Then when you talk about the evaluation processes, that after you have completed what you want to do, you are doing an evaluation. Okay, did we actually achieve what we set out to do in the first instance? And that is part of what your impact assessment also tells you. So the kind of all in one. That's why I said in some organizations you have it as a function, a monitoring and evaluation team, in a monitoring and evaluation unit. They are responsible for carrying out the monitoring and the monitoring function as well as the evaluation function. So what's the other part of the question? I think you.
Yeah, I wanted to know if there are associations. Yeah, I guess they can catch up on the tools. I don't want you repeating yourself. I know you also have a hard stop very soon. I was asking if there are associations or bodies you can network with.
So the one I might just want to recommend to you right now is the Sustainability Professionals Institute of Nigeria, called SPIN. I think that's one body you should look out for and join. You can check them out on the website, on their website, and I think it's a good organization that you will learn a lot from. From time to time, there are lecture series around the subjects of the subject of discussion today, and several other subjects that will be very, very useful for you and your organization. So that's one I would recommend for now locally.
All right, thank you very much. A very big thank you to our speakers, Ms. Tendai Matika and Mr. Edward Fagbon. I think this has been a great learning experience for me, and I trust that it's been the same for our participants. We're going to be rounding up very soon because we know that you need to get to other things. But before we do that, if you do not mind turning on your camera so that we can quickly take a shot of you in this webinar. So we'll do that in a few seconds. If you could turn on your cameras. Do you need to powder your nose? You can do that in 2 seconds. Hi, Natasha. I can see Natasha King. Who else has turned on their cameras? Okay. Are we good to go? Oh, I'm so sorry. I need to stop sharing. Okay. Okay, you just smile. Our photographer is doing a thing. A few more seconds and we will be done. Hello, Aziza. Good to see you. Hello, Yakub Adeleke. Okay, just a few more seconds. 3, 2, and 1. Okay, we are done. All right, like I said, we are rounding up very, very soon. In a few minutes, we will be done. Our ACTPod is ACT Foundation's podcast show that put a spotlight on change makers across Africa who are doing great stuff. It's also a learning environment for, you who are development enthusiasts too. The episode that's currently running is on strategic partnerships with the public sector, for transport and transformation. And that was done with Buki Akushemoyi of AIG Imokwede Foundation. So if you haven't listened yet, this is a good time to go and stream on podcast platforms, Spotify and whatever you have, Google platform, Apple Podcast, and of course on our YouTube channel, it is available there. You can listen in and get some interesting insights on working with the public sector. Okay, do not forget to fill out our feedback form. It's going to pop up just when you leave the room. Please ensure that you fill the feedback form so that you can give us insight into how today's session went and what you would have loved to see us do differently. All right, like I said, we're closing, and yes, we are actually closing. Now I'll call on our head of programs and grants, Ugochukwu Umosu, to formally say thank you to our awesome speakers and close us formally. Over to you, Ugochukwu. Hello, Ugochukwu.
Okay, I can't see Ugochukwu. So
But you hear me?
Who are you here? Okay, he's here.
Oh, okay. So thank you, everyone. Thank you for an amazing time. I want to thank Edward and Tendai. It was very insightful session, and everyone who participated very actively. Impact is a very critical part of the work that we do and the work that most all non-profits do across Africa, and we're grateful for your time to break down some of the complex things into simpler processes. I thank everyone who joined this session, and we look forward to more sessions, and I do hope that the lessons will improve the work that we do across the region. Thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you again, Ugochukwu. And that voice you heard was the voice of our Chief Executive Officer, Ms. Osai Alile. She's been here the whole time. She's been cheering you both. And has really enjoyed, she's really enjoying this session.
Thank you, Osai, for your support always.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Edward. Thank you, Tata.
Thank you.
All right. Enjoy the rest of your day. Have a very good afternoon, everyone. And remember, this is going to be on YouTube. It's going to be streaming forever on YouTube. So please, you can go catch up in case you didn't join us on time. Have a lovely day. Bye, everyone.
All right. Bye.
Bye.
Hello, my name
and be willing to go along with whatever we offer them.
The Time to Screen program started in 2017, and since then, ACT Foundation has given us a multi-year grant that has enabled us to screen 32,000 women for breast and cervical cancer at no cost to the women across 100 communities. And really the why behind that is because in Nigeria, more than 120,000 new cancer cases are diagnosed, 40% of which are preventable cancers like cervical cancer, which occurs in women.
With the Time to Screen, through the help of the partnership and from ACT Foundation over the years, we've been able to carry this particular Time to Screen to the communities across Lagos State, Ogun State, Oyo State. So the women will come to the venue or to the location. So what we do as nurses, the first thing is to gather them and help educate them on the particular program we are bringing to them, so that they will be able to accept what we bring and be willing to go along with whatever we offer them.